Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Thorogood Associates hosted webinar, In Focus, Multi-Cloud Data Strategies. My name is Alaistair Jones, and I'm a data and analytics consultant based out of our London office with experience working with clients from our US, Singapore, and UK offices. I'm joined by my colleague, Raghav Pandey, who is also a data and analytics consultant with experience delivering strategies and solutions for clients from our Singapore, India, and currently also our UK office. So I'm going to start today's webinar by briefly explaining who Thorogood is and why we're well positioned to explore this topic for those less familiar with us. We'll then discuss a brief history of cloud computing and how the cloud has impacted data and analytics. We'll define multi-cloud data strategies and review how many enterprise organizations are or are planning to be multi-cloud in nature. We'll explore the important considerations when operating in a multi-cloud world, and we'll discuss the specific technical considerations as they pertain to the realm of data and analytics. So Thorogood is a specialist data and analytics consultancy with offices in the US, Brazil, the UK, India, and Singapore. We offer a range of services within the niche of data analytics, from strategies and tool selections and roadmaps to tool trainings and platform support adoption and adoption initiatives. But the bulk of what we do is application design and development. As a consultancy, we're customer focused. And we're also independent, meaning that we partner and work with several of the leading vendors and platforms in our space. And we think this independence makes us uniquely well placed to discuss multi-cloud data strategies. We have long-standing partnerships with several of the leading cloud vendors in Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud, and cloud platforms in Anaplan, Databricks, Tableau, and more. We deliver initiatives for clients on and across these various cloud offerings as makes most sense for that particular client's needs. And in terms of the clients that we work with, well, we work with several blue chip and industry leading firms. Primarily, our work tends to be with companies operating in the consumer goods, insurance, banking, and pharmaceuticals industries, as we find these sectors tend to be particularly data rich, though we're not at all limited to working with organizations in these sectors, and we do often branch out. So I'm going to start today's content in earnest by discussing the topic and introducing cloud computing, sharing its origins and history, and then beginning to discuss its relevance to data and analytics. So the late decorated former Stanford professor John McCarthy, a visionary computer scientist who coined the term artificial intelligence, suggested in 1961 that computing would one day be sold as a utility. And this is one of the core concepts that defines the cloud today. We've seen the advent of massive technology companies doing just this. Another key to making cloud computing work is the ability for multiple users in different locations to share the same computer resource, which is referred to as virtualization. The third core concept and prerequisite for enabling cloud computing is accessing these shared resources via effective networking. Now, if we take a look back at the history of cloud computing since John McCarthy's prescient quote in the early 1960s, we saw several decades of progress in terms of computing and the invention of personal computers between the 1960s and 80s. Though the 1990s marked the widespread adoption of personal computers, as well as importantly, the beginning of the internet age. Amazon Web Services became a cloud computing vendor when they created an offering to host other retailer websites in 2002. Though AWS later broadened their offering with a platform that included S3 cloud storage in 2006. And Microsoft and Google entered the fray in 2008. And all of these firms started to offer proprietary database services that mimicked the software that was available for sale to be deployed on on-premises servers. The early 2010s saw the proliferation of the kind of cloud-native platforms from independent companies such as Databricks, Snowflake, and Tableau Online, offering customers even more compelling choices. That led to a double of cloud spend in the latter part of the 2010s, from $35 billion per year to $70 billion per year by the end of the decade. Now, in the first third of the 2020s, we're beginning to see the increased prevalence of multi-cloud strategies for a variety of reasons that we will discuss with you shortly. When considering how to define cloud computing, it's probably worthwhile to turn to one of the commercial pioneers and long-standing market leaders in the space, Amazon Web Services. AWS described cloud computing as the on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. Instead of buying, owning, and maintaining physical data centers and servers, you can access technology services such as computing power, storage, and databases on an as-needed basis from a cloud provider. So what does this mean for businesses? Well, fundamentally, the cloud enables companies to move from large, fixed, upfront investments with a commitment to recurring costs and staffing to manage them, to minimal initial investments, but rather paying for what they need and what they want to use, allowing for the ability to scale up or scale down as makes most sense. In accounting terms, firms are trading CapEx for OpEx. It is worth mentioning various discrete types of cloud services, from infrastructure as a service, which is most akin to on-premise server management in terms of the customer handling the operating system, applications, middleware, data runtime, and more, to platform as a service, which entails less management for the customer and more is on the vendor, to software as a service, whereby almost all aspects of managing and maintaining the application are handled by the vendor on behalf of the customer. So finally, how has the cloud transformed the data and analytics landscape specifically? Well, it's enabled never before seen levels of agility and responsiveness, with data functions able to create and adapt faster than ever before. It's engendered greater operational resilience, with large technology organizations backing these services with highly advanced data centers. It promotes innovation as organizations are able to tap into and promote some of the kind of best-in-class services available. It fosters experimentation as trialing and provisioning cloud services is simpler than ever before. A reduced dependence on IT is enabled by tech vendors, providing the majority of the support and maintenance. It allows flexibility for quick analysis on a broader array of data than ever before possible. And ultimately and critically, it enables DevOps, which is the principle of an organization efficiently maintaining but also enhancing and developing their solutions simultaneously in a very effective and well-managed way. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Raghav Pandey, who's going to begin to speak about what multi-cloud data strategies are specifically.
Thanks, Alaistair. So as Alaistair introduced me earlier, I'm Raghav, and I'm a data analytics consultant at Thorogood with experience delivering strategies and solutions for some of our global customers. And I wanted to bring some of my experience from over the last few years to bear in this discussion about multi-cloud data strategies. So with the context of the cloud and its benefits in mind, as Alaistair enumerated, what really is a multi-cloud strategy? So what we have on screen here is a definition that I really like, as it uses a very key word, which is a multi-cloud strategy is the deliberate use of cloud services from multiple public cloud providers for the same general class of IT solutions or workloads. And almost always when we're referring to an organization being a multi-cloud one, we are referring to them using infrastructure as a service or platform as a service offerings across clouds, and not software as a service, which are usually managed by the vendor, as Alaistair mentioned earlier. And the use of the word deliberate is key here, as many organizations become accidentally multi-cloud rather than deliberately adopting a multi-cloud strategy. Now, being multi-cloud increases management and governance challenges, could increase the complexity and possibly the cost of infrastructure and IT in general, and demands greater skills from organizations. However, a well-governed multi-cloud strategy can improve an organization's access to a breadth of technology choices and innovative best-of-breed capabilities as well. And that is why we see roughly 92% of the enterprise firms today theorizing or implementing a multi-cloud data strategy, as Gartner recently reported. So we mentioned about the accidental and deliberate foray of an organization into a multi-cloud world. And I wanted to bring some examples from our experience as an organization in working with some of the world's largest enterprise firms to define what those possible paths could be to being a multi-cloud organization. Now, if I had to put these paths or reasons on a spectrum, it would look something like this. So firstly, proliferation, which is where the direction and strategy from the center of an organization hasn't been able to permeate all of its parts, leaving smaller groups at times to do their own decision making. And this often leads to deviations in cloud architectures which are followed, differences in the use of cloud services, or the use of entirely different cloud providers as well. Now, the pace of maturity in different parts of an organization to adopt the benefits of a cloud could have been different as well. And with options and maturity of the cloud providers themselves only increasing, it could have made sense to adopt a different choice from what central IT may have mandated years ago. A second, more incidental or accidental foray into being a multi-cloud organization could have come from acquiring another organization and inheriting their systems, which may be using one or several different cloud providers, which are different from what the parent organization has in place. Thirdly, a more conscious choice that some of our customer organizations are taking is to explore services from different clouds that offer a differentiated capability, which services in the organization's current cloud of choice does not really provide, or where arriving at a similar result or performing similar analysis requires significantly more. And we have seen, for example, organizations evaluating Google Cloud services for their earth mapping capabilities or their ability to manage customer or consumer data in integration with marketing and ad spend, as some of these services provide a unique value proposition that is hard to find in other clouds. You could argue that similarly, both Azure and Amazon Web Services have their own differentiated capabilities as well. Fourthly, for organizations whose cloud data platforms have matured and for whom tracking consumption costs is key, adopting a multi-cloud approach has been instrumental in ensuring competitive offers and rebates from cloud service providers for consumption costs. Correspondingly, there are rules which govern at times what data you can actually hold in your cloud, depending on your cloud of choice. Say, for example, in the retail world, holding data for competitor to Amazon on AWS services may not be possible because of some of the rules amongst these organizations. And therefore, having another cloud option where you can make the most of that specific competitive data would be useful. Finally, regulatory reasons such as data residency rules or governments mandating the building in of contingency in, say, certain crucial financial services organizations has led enterprises to adopt a multi-cloud strategy. And that's a good segue in us talking about the reasons for why organizations may find a multi-cloud setup useful. Increasing productivity is a key one. So using top resources from various cloud providers allows you to be more productive. One vendor could, say, for example, efficiently handle your large data transfers, while the other could excel in making happen certain critical use cases that provide an organization with a distinct competitive advantage. Secondly, apart from productivity, working with different cloud providers offers more flexibility. IT teams could face unique challenges when deploying certain applications and may, for example, need to use Amazon Web Services to store data and Azure for data processing. And having access to multiple clouds makes this possible. Further, as we mentioned earlier, companies can move their workloads between different cloud applications and take advantage of dynamic pricing and thus possibly cut costs as well. And this is related to our next point, that having a multi-cloud strategy helps organizations avoid being locked in or dependent on a vendor and its particular protocols, proprietary systems, or pricing as well. A strong reason to explore multi-cloud strategy is that if your primary cloud fails, you can move your data, workflows, and systems to a backup cloud. So multi-cloud strategy is a failover solution at times that ensures that your mission-critical applications are always available. Next, working with multiple cloud vendors allows companies to store data in data centers which are closest to their customers. And such proximity to your end users reduces latency and improves the response times of cloud services in general. Now, with the proliferation and wide adoption of the cloud worldwide, more and more data centers are popping up for these major cloud vendors. But for now, we think this is still a relevant and strong reason to explore a multi-cloud strategy. And finally, as we had hinted to earlier, data privacy and governance regulations, such as the GDPR, often require that sensitive data be held in specific jurisdictions. So a multi-cloud strategy provides companies with different options on where to store their data. In summary, all the reasons stated here offer a compelling case for why an organization should consider having a multi-cloud strategy. Because if done right, a multi-cloud setup enables organizations to improve their speed and time to market, spend less possibly, and innovate more freely. But there are challenges as well to be wary of. And as a result of becoming a multi-cloud organization, architectural complexity may increase manifold. If the usage of multiple clouds and services is not done in a governed and consistent manner, the overhead of maintaining your cloud footprint can become a nightmare. Secondly, being multi-cloud demands extra agility from organizations and its IT teams. A multi-cloud strategy may offer more flexibility when managing multiple cloud applications and shifting between them when requires agility and precision. Thirdly, managing and moving data in various clouds require organizations to defend a wider attack surface and deal with more security threats. So it's key that organizations establish their security protocols, which are all-encompassing and are sophisticated in advance of expanding their footprint into multiple clouds. As usually, retrospective fixes say once you expand into multiple clouds over a wide landscape, leave certain vulnerable attack points which have the potential to significantly affect an organization's business. Lastly, a multi-cloud strategy means organizations are responsible for data governance in multiple clouds. So really tracking the flow of data from source to its usage could pose a challenge, especially for applications that span across clouds. Enabling access and ensuring data discoverability as well across the landscape of multiple clouds could prove to be difficult as well. And we will pick up on this, particularly in a few minutes. So if these are some of the challenges, what are the key success factors you need to have in mind to ensure you have a proper strategy? And I will start off by saying that knowing the why of multi-cloud is important. So organizations must really keep their objectives top of mind, whether it be innovation, whether it be the intention to reduce your vendor lock-in or eliminate your on-premises IT infrastructure. This reason as to why an organization should be key and at the forefront of their thinking. A multi-cloud strategy should also include buy-in from all stakeholders, including the executives. And really knowing the why helps organizations retain focus and judge new developments and options critically, enabling the objective of choosing that which only fits their particular needs. Secondly, keeping an eye on costs is important. Cloud platforms are different, and without an abstraction layer or a way to create, say, consistent operations, sometimes security, data movement, governance costs can grow with the addition of each cloud. Thirdly, as multi-cloud at times adds complexity, an organization must plan for needed skills. Although management tools can mitigate some of this complexity, new skills will be required to manage a multi-cloud environment and take advantage of the benefits of cloud-native application strategies. Whether these skills come from training existing teams, hiring from the outside, or by leveraging partners, they will be required to get a multi-cloud strategy off the ground and implement it well. Finally, it's important to measure progress and think about innovation as you do that. Organization leaders will want to determine if a multi-cloud strategy is achieving its stated goals. So look for ways in which you can measure the payback of this approach. And you can think of traditional sort of measures like a return on investment or a total cost of ownership of IT over a given time frame to define, say, a return on a multi-cloud strategy and its implementation. But we would say that it's also important to account for the business benefits that have been made possible by being a multi-cloud organization. Further, document and report on these outcomes and share these reports with stakeholders to grow confidence in the strategy enterprise-wide. Now, having talked about the considerations involved in being a multi-cloud organization, I want to spend a few minutes here at the end talking about some technical considerations specifically with respect to data analytics. Alaistair mentioned at the outset about the three particular ingredients of cloud computing, and really, these have been democratized and made available by all the major cloud providers, with there being relatively minor differences between the offerings. But what next when thinking multi-cloud? Well, when choosing services which utilize this base layer, it is important to be conscious of the considerations. The choice that organizations are posed with is what services or technologies should they use to build out their data and analytics landscape? Should it be the cloud vendor services which are specific to a cloud and those which were heavily utilized by the early adopters of the cloud? Or to utilize platform as a service or software as a service offerings that can be used across cloud platforms such as Databricks, Snowflake, or Informatica. And these are options that are actually gaining in popularity today. Or choose something as a basis like Spark, which is truly open source and allows for easy portability across cloud platforms while retaining optionality as new offerings come through. And we would argue to have organizations consider using languages, tools, and offerings that are as open in nature as possible. So the more organizations employing a multi-cloud strategy or intending to move towards a multi-cloud setup can move away from using technology-specific features which restrict portability to something that is open enough to allow quick pivots as and when needed, the easier it would be to get the most out of the various clouds. Now, as we mentioned earlier, there may always exist some specific features or tools in each of the different cloud options that satisfy a specific need, and that is completely fine. The idea here is to have that be the exception rather than the default in a multi-cloud world. And really supplementing that point, maintaining data in open formats allows for easy replicability if required across cloud platforms and provides an organization with maximum optionality to utilize the services they like and at scale. Where data is required to be visualized using SQL and in relational tables, abstraction layers that provide that functionality over the data lake, like say Database SQL, are available. And thus really the storage of data in a database, which was the traditional option and one that could rather make portability potentially difficult, now has a viable alternative. And to support the portability that tools which run on multiple cloud platforms and something like Spark provide in conjunction with open data formats, an organization needs to hold expertise in DevOps. Achieving consistent deployment patterns, proven and dependable ways to manage the movement of data, and replicating functionality where needed, and doing all of this in a secure manner is fundamental to a successful data and analytics multi-cloud strategy. And finally, as we mentioned earlier, the need for governance which spans multiple cloud data platforms, although a challenge, is also slowly becoming possible through tooling like Azure Purview, which is Azure's data governance offering, which while connecting to all data assets in the Azure world and your on-prem setup, can now also connect to the data lake within Amazon Web Services and BigQuery within the Google Cloud. And this is really useful because it makes having a bird's eye view of data movement across the multi-cloud landscape a possibility. Now, there are several more aspects to consider, but hopefully this list serves as a useful primer for those of you who are thinking about a multi-cloud setup from the lens of data analytics. And on that same note, we would be happy to help with that thinking and broaden it out further. Our independence as a firm, our strong partnerships with leading cloud vendors and platforms, and our experience of working with and defining multi-cloud setups for some of the world's leading organizations in the world holds us in good stead to have a conversation with you and tailor all these considerations and more to your specific needs. And with that, I would like to say thank you. Alaistair and my contact credentials are on screen, and we would be happy to have you pick up with us on this topic, either on LinkedIn or over email. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you and goodbye.